There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm James Carberry.
And I'm Jonathan Green.
Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Joel Harrison. He is the editor-in-chief at B2B Marketing. Joel, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you guys?
I am fantastic. So, Joel, I've been looking forward to this interview with you being in the role that you're in at a company called B2B Marketing. I think you're going to be a perfect fit for this audience. I think our listeners are going to get a ton of value out of this content. But before we get into that, for those listening that maybe aren't familiar with B2B Marketing, can you tell us a little bit about what you and your team are up to over there?
Sure, yeah. It's a really good question. So we're in that category which is slightly nebulous, which is an information provider. So, 5 years ago, you'd have said we're a media organization. We still have a magazine, which is similar to the B2B magazine, which existed in the States until a few years ago. We still have a magazine. We do events. We do training for marketers. But increasingly, we're moving into a more kind of thought leadership space where we're trying to kind of help lead the market and show B2B marketers where things are going and how to do things better. So that's delivered by reports and by kind of insight pieces and me doing speaking engagements and things like that. So that's a really kind of high level overview.
No, I love it. I've been on your email list for a few months now, and I love the content that you guys are putting out. So, Joel, we're going to focus today's interview on customer experience, and we're really going to be talking about 5 questions that a B2B marketer needs to ask himself or ask herself to know whether or not they're really creating an incredible customer experience. And so to kind of frame this up for those listening, maybe they're not as familiar with the term customer experience or it can be thought of as kind of nebulous. And can you help understand when you say customer experience, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so CX is really a really interesting emerging area. And I think it's always been important. It's always been relevant to marketers. But I think the world we're living in at the moment, the Amazon world, the Amazon kind of defined world, everything, the customer experience is becoming increasingly critical, increasingly a battleground for B2B marketers in a way that it wasn't perhaps in years gone by. And there was a kind of a disconnected experience, a disconnected journey which buyers had through all of your touch points and all your different experiences along the way. So what's happened most recently with the kind of consumerization piece is this expectations have gone up around immediacy and delight and things like that. People expect to have a much better, much more connected, omni-channel customer experience. And we've very much focused on that. But I think in B2B, you can't just talk about the immediate transactional piece. You have to talk around very much, not just pre-sale, but before you even know, before individual buyers even know they've even got a problem, there's something they might need. And then way after, they've stopped just being a customer, but whilst they're an advocate in the long run. So we've viewed CX not just around just the immediate digital transaction element or digital conversion element, should I say, but the whole journey from the very, very start to the very beginning. So, it's quite complex and it's long-winded, but it's very important to see that we believe in that continuum.
Yeah. So this first question, Joel, that you recommend that B2B marketers ask themselves to really understand whether they're creating a great customer experience is this. It's, have you mapped excellence in CX across all touch points? Talk to us about this a bit.
So can I just rewind just a tiny little bit back from that, just to provide a bit of context to this. So we did a research report last year, which is available on our site to members. There's a synopsis you can also get as well for free. And we asked a couple of hundred marketers or a couple of hundred buyers rather, about what they thought about the recent B2B purchase that they'd made. We asked them about different stages of that and what was good and what was bad. We then also asked a couple of hundred marketers what they thought about CX and the experiences which they'd had and how they perceived its level of importance and how they were doing it and what the challenges were. So we're able to kind of cross-map these kind of different differing perspectives and see where they were aligned and where they weren't. And then we, this is a piece which we're now rolling out we offer training on this as well. And we have this report. We did a big conference on it last autumn. So that's the kind of context. And the 5 points you're talking about are really a checklist that come right at the end of the report, and the real distillation of all the things that we talked about within that. So this is like a shorthand for a really big piece of work which we took a long time to do, but it's the key points. So we're cutting to the chase here.
Love it. I love it. So with that context being said, let's dive into this first one. Obviously, this isn't the full list. You'll want to download that report to get the full checklist. But with what we're going to be talking about today, this first point is around, mapping excellence in CX across all touch points. Talk to us about that one.
Okay. So, I think that the important thing to say here is that, as I mentioned earlier on, B2B buyers expect the engagement to be omni-channel, and they expect it to be seamless as well. People expect you to have a common, coherent and consistent experience across all your touch points, not only in the online kind of transactional or conversional aspect of the B2B piece, and by that I almost just mean the kind of awareness piece, but also long before that, both in terms of how you engage with people, you engage with your audience more generally around what your brand looks like, how it speaks to people, and then afterwards in the pre-sale environment, the customer service environment, and then in the alumni piece. So I think it's kind of an obvious thing, really, but you've got to. But really, if you recognise that CX is really important, and I do think it's critical for marketers in this day and age, you've actually got to understand where it impacts on people and what excellence actually looks like, what you're seeking to achieve, and where you're falling down. So you need to understand the journey, understand the areas where you're doing a really good job and where you need to really put more effort in, and it's just a simple apportioning of effort. So until you've mapped the excellence, it's very hard for you to make a demonstrable difference to how you're delivering your CX.
And when you say all touch points, to go back to what you said at the beginning of the interview, you're talking, touch points all the way from the, first contact that the prospect has with the brand all the way, through to a touch point at the very end, or not at the end, actually, after they've purchased your product or service, and then long into kind of the customer advocacy stage of the relationship, looking at all of those different touch points where your brand touches them. Am I understanding that correct?
That's correct. And obviously that bit becomes much more disconnected from the actual revenue generation part, but it is still really important. And obviously it's, the bit where there is a more immediate concern is closer to the sale, both closer before and more immediately afterwards. That's where there is kind of more immediate onus. But I think what we're trying to say is you can't just forget about these points because they're immediately out of sight, because they will have an impact on your propensity to sell stuff to people in the future.
All right, Joel. So this next question that marketers need to ask themselves to really ensure that they are creating a great customer experience is, do you have a coherent and consistent CX plan with metrics? Talk to us about that.
Okay, so once you've actually understood where you're getting something wrong, you've got to understand what you're trying to address and how you're going to do it. So you obviously need a plan to do that. You need to understand what the ramifications of that are across your entire business and at different organizational levels. Where are you going to see the biggest impact? Where are you falling down, and what can you do about that? And most importantly, you need to actually look at, you need to understand what your metrics should be there, because as any marketer knows, if you can't demonstrate the success of something or how something is failing at the moment, it's very hard to prove to the wider business the importance of it and that you're making a demonstrable impact there. And metrics is one of the areas where I thought the whole CX thing is probably in most need of work. We looked at different metrics that people use, and the most popular one was customer satisfaction scores, followed by NPS, which is only used by about half of people, and then the one after that was complaint log. So the third biggest metric was when something went so badly wrong that somebody had to complain about it, and that for me underlines the challenge people have here, that they don't really understand the importance of CX and how to judge that, and how to reinforce the importance across the business.
So what are some of the metrics that people should be looking at?
I think customer satisfaction scores are really powerful. The simple answer to this is we aren't overwhelmed with great metrics in this area, and NPS seemed to be the strongest thing to use. And we had at the event we ran on CX, we had a great conversation about NPS, and lots of people, it seems to be like a bit of NPS seems like a bit of a wormhole. When people get on board with it, they really, really get on board with it, and they kind of take it to the nth degree. And we have brands like MySys, who are a big B2B software brand, who are actually developing their own version of NPS because they don't think it's good enough. We had Rackspace who are a technology hosting brand, talking about how they use it an awful lot, and BSI, who are a standards organization, they rely on it an awful lot. But NPS is probably the best one to use. It's the kind of most robust one. It's the most measurable one. It has its limitations. The customer satisfaction scores are more generally are also very useful. I think that there is a weakness here about how people diagnose these things.
Okay, so this third piece, Joel, this question that marketers need to be asking is, are all relevant departments and at every level aligned and on board? Talk to us about this one.
So CX is not just something which is done by marketing to the rest of the organization. And actually there's a debate around that, because there's a conversation about whether marketing can or should own CX. But, marketing CX for me is a combination of different disciplines. It's the customer service function, whatever way that kind of incarnates itself in your business. It's definitely marketing. It absolutely has to be sales. And it's also the digital team. So increasingly it's about the digital interface that your organization has with its customers. And marketing is in the best place to pull that all together and to make that coherent, because the other functions tend to be a bit more siloed in their thinking. But everybody needs to understand their role in this. And that particularly means everyone in a front line role. That means the individual rank and file salespeople need to understand their place in this. And we all know how difficult that can be, but it needs to happen. As anybody with a customer facing role needs to understand their role in the kind of continuum and what they have to do, what they shouldn't be doing to ensure a consistent experience for the customer. And that needs to filter all the way up to the top as well, because it's too easy for the board to say, well, I don't think CX is important for me. I don't buy into this. They need to buy into the role, the importance of it, and that's where those metrics come back in again. These things we are contending should be reported to the board. They should be taken really, really seriously. And the board needs to not just pay lip service to this, they need to actually genuinely advocate and start and demonstrate the kind of behaviour in terms of the seriousness within which this is taken in the organisation to demonstrate and to prove it to the rest of the organisation. If they're just paying lip service, then it won't be done properly by everybody else.
And so do you typically find that it's the board and it's the more senior level executives that have a tougher time getting their head around CX as opposed to kind of the more boots on the ground folks that are interacting with customers on a daily basis? I would have thought that it would have been the other way around, but from the way you framed that, it seems like it's the opposite of what I was thinking.
It's easy for the board to say, yes, this is important, I understand it, but then not really get what it means to them. A lot of them, by a simple matter of demographics, tend to be a bit older. They tend to be less comfortable in the digital space. They tend to be less comfortable with customer expectations in the current world. They spend less time with customers than sales do, definitely, and marketing does probably. So they're less likely to understand the nuances of what good CX looks like today and be able to perhaps relate their kind of consumer expectations, which do define what great B2B customer experience is like as well. They're less likely to be able to make that leap. So I guess to be fair, James, I guess the challenge is probably different with different people.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. My original thought on this one was that if you're including everybody in the organization in the specific kind of action plan for how you're going to be executing the customer experience across kind of all different parts of the buying journey and after someone becomes a customer, the more buy-in that someone's going to have if they felt like they had input in the creation of the processes that go into that customer experience. So as I was thinking, as we were talking about this offline, that was one thought that I had, just an actionable thing that if I were trying to implement this in a larger organization would be something I would think about is how can I get feedback from every level in the organization? And in getting that feedback, the likelihood of them embracing it is probably much higher.
I think you're absolutely right. And, anytime we want change in a company, to have a champion of that change, to have an advocate and someone who actually stands up and demonstrably embodies what you're trying to do, it makes it so much more powerful and so much more likely to happen.
Yep, totally. So this fourth one, Joel, I want to talk about is, are you actively engaging influencers and cultivating your alumni? Talk to us about this. Okay, so
the research we did proves the power of influencers in the buying process. And when I say influence in this context, I'm not specifically talking about social media influencers, because there's this whole term influencer marketing right now, which certainly over here is getting an awful lot of traction. I'm sure I'm very surprised if it wasn't the case in the US. So there's a lot of hype around that. And those people are important, right? But there are other people who are also important in that process. And those are kind of perhaps the more informal or more personal influences that you have. They're potentially advisors or colleagues or mentors. Trusted organizations, particularly small businesses, rely often on kind of advisors and advocates and things to help them make key decisions. It's anybody who is going to act for you and kind of propagate your message around the wider world. And you increasingly see the power of this interpersonal recommendation from people that you respect, either in a formal kind of mentorship or ship basis, or just a kind of a former colleague. So to see this wider influencer network, but also then I guess there's also the kind of a more formal influencer basis, the people, in the technology spaces, people like Gartner, and I'm sure there are similar kind of influential bodies in different industries. So you really need to understand what that influencer network looks like, and to try and engage those people and help them. And when it says cultivating your alumni, what that, in this context, we're referring to alumni as previous customers. So whether they lapsed or whether they moved on, increasing, the research showed how powerful previous customers are in proving and demonstrating the value of a product and service, and how often with a B2B purchase, so much of the decision, it's something like 90% of decisions are made way before people even go into a formal kind of tendering or market research process. They've already got a really good idea about who they're going to work with, because either they personally worked with them before, a current colleague has worked with them before, or someone in the organisation has worked with them before, or a previous acquaintance, somebody else that they know through other means has worked with them. So that alumni sense of, if you're able to maintain those connections with people who you've bought from the past, that's tremendously powerful in your future purchasing base. And you may, in a way that you may not be able to track as well, but it is tremendously powerful.
No, I love it, Joel. So this last one that we're going to touch on today, before I let you go, this last question that marketers need to ask is, do you act on feedback? This is so important. Talk to us about this one.
So I'm totally bought in as well to this one, James. I mean, we all, as brands, we all ask for feedback all the time. And, we send out surveys and, request kind of anecdotal feedback. But the research showed that people just don't believe that this feedback is acted upon. So it's not just acting on it, it's demonstrably acting on it. Or if you can't act on it, tell people why you're not acting on it. Make it clear that you have listened and you have heard, and if you haven't done something, this is why you haven't done it, but this is what you can do about it. There is a high latent level of cynicism that brands listen to what their customers think and how they and their experience. So you almost have to overcompensate and provide any opportunity to show that you're listening, and where you're able to change something, really, really shout about it, because it will have so much resonance with your customers.
Oh, I love it. Joel, this has been incredible. If there's somebody that wants to stay connected with you, maybe they want to dig deeper on this, or they want to learn more about B2B marketing and what you and your team are up to over there, what's the best way for them to go about doing both of those things?
Well, you can go to our website and register. That's b2bmarketing.net. And we've got you can register for regular email updates. You can follow us on Twitter, which is @marketingb2b, or you can follow me personally on Twitter @Joel_B2B editor. We're also on LinkedIn, and a little bit we're on Facebook, but you can find us on LinkedIn definitely as well.
Wonderful, Joel. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate it.
James, thank you. Great pleasure.
To ensure that you never miss an episode of the B2B Growth Show, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device.
If you'd like to connect with B2B executives from all over the world, make sure to join our private Facebook community. There are some incredible conversations happening inside this group. To join, visit b2bgrowthshow.com/FB.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.